call them the golden years. The problem comes when others try to steal that gold, whether financial, physical, or psychological. Elder abuse, tonight, on call with the Prairie Doc.
Good evening and welcome to On Call with the Prairie Doc. Most cultures have some traditions of respecting their elders, especially the Chinese and the American Indian cultures. American journalist Tia Walker said, "To care for those who once cared for us is one of the highest honors." Unfortunately, there are those among us who may see the elderly as a burden to the family, a source of added stress, or even potential victim for financial gain. Sadly, whether by neglect, threats, physical violence, or a smooth-talking con artist, our elder population is in need of protection. Okay, let's take a look at this week's Prairie Doc quiz question. This week, we want you to think about the various kinds of elder abuse and how you would recognize them. The quiz question is, name 2 possible signs that would warn of some kind of abuse. There are unfortunately many to choose from. Viewers who call in the correct answer will be entered into a drawing to win a signed copy of our book, The Picture of Health. Each of my essays, originally written for this show, comes with a wonderful accompanying photograph by Dr. Judith Peterson. We'll announce the answer and the winner at the end of the show, but remember, you only have 10 minutes to get your answer in, and we answer your questions, more importantly, concerning elder abuse as they're called in or sent to us via Facebook or email. Call in your question, please, to 1-888-376-6225, or send us an email. Joining us tonight is Kristina Schaefer, General Counsel and Director of Risk Management for Fishback Financial Corporation, and David Brechtelsbauer, geriatrician and educator for family physicians at the USD Sanford School of Medicine. Thank you both for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Kristina, tell us a little bit about your job. I mean, what does a Director of Risk Management do as it relates to older customers in particular?
It's a good question. Risk management encompasses our fraud area. And so what our job is to do is to help watch for fraud that might be impacting all of our customers, particularly our elderly customers. We not only watch for it, but then when we do have someone who might be victim of fraud, we help them work through the steps they need to do.
So, but that rarely happens, right? Or
well, I wish that was the case. Unfortunately with cybercrime and just everything that's going on in today's society, fraud is an increasing problem for banks and for the general population, particularly our older population.
But you would think that if they're using sneaky cyber world methods, we could do sneaky cyber world methods to find them and prosecute them and get them out of there. If we were successful in doing that, there would be less of it, you would think.
Well, you would think, but I think that's part of the problem is catching these people. A lot of the cyber criminals aren't in the United States. They're smart. And it only takes one successful attempt for them to make some money. So it's very easy to do, very hard to catch. And again, unfortunately, most of the people are overseas.
Somebody got my email address and sent it to, 150 friends and said, dear friends, I've been on a trip to Paris. I got stuck. I'm without any money. I just need $2,000 to get back. I'll pay you back when I get back, which was a lie.
Right.
And they even called them on it, and there was someone who answered the phone. He's in the hotel here. I'm sorry I can't find him right now, but
Right. They're smart. I mean, they have to be in order to do it. And again, all it takes is one, and now we've paid that person's wages until they find their next victim.
So it's terrible, and there are a lot out there.
It is.
And so you're going to help us learn. I mean, think about it. Are the elderly more prone to be hit by this kind of a criminal?
Well, I think they are, and the reasons for that are many. One, we're generally trusting people, and we don't like to think of bad things happening to us. Some elderly people are maybe not as technologically sophisticated as others, so you get an email like that, you might think it's legitimately from you. The other thing is, no one wants to be a victim of that. Our elderly population in particular, they're proud. They don't want to admit that, maybe this is happening to them. Maybe I should do something about it. So they don't tell.
Call the police. They don't do
anything. Right.
We need to talk more about that.
Okay.
But Dr. Brechtelsbauer, you and I have known each other for many, many years. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and what are you doing?
Well, I was born and raised in Michigan, went through all my education there, practiced 9 years in rural Virginia, and then came here to teach family medicine residents and develop geriatric curriculum.
So here you are practicing in Virginia, and you heard about this job, or what? How in the world?
Well, it turns out my wife was born in Sioux Falls but moved away when she was a little girl, and she said, we should go look at that. We saw an ad. She said, look at that, because I've written Sioux Falls, South Dakota in my birth date question for a long time, but I have no real memory of that town.
Yes.
We got here and we loved it.
And you've been here for how many years?
Since 1985.
And you've been teaching family physicians. I mean, that part of your role as an educator. Do you do practice much?
I stopped seeing patients 18 months ago, so now I'm pretty much exclusively an educator and a nursing home medical director.
Wow. And so why would it be that you two are on this show tonight? David, would you tell me?
Well, we were both invited and participated in the governor's task force to look into elder abuse and make recommendations to the legislature.
And you were both in different subcommittees, as I understand it, so you really didn't rub shoulders much doing this.
Guardianship and power of attorney issues. And Kristen?
I was on the Financial Exploitation Committee. That was my primary role, just because financial exploitation is such a significant problem. I was also a member of the Education Committee, because now that this is all said and done, we have another task ahead of us, and that's getting information out to people who need it.
And what are we doing? We're doing that.
We're
educating.
us.
Well, you're welcome.
We're checking that off. We've been on Prairie Doc.
We've at least made
we won.
4 to 10,000 people watching right now, we think.
All right.
And at least we're getting, many of them are elderly.
Mm-hmm.
But what did you, part of what you did was to look at what's out there. How much of this is going on? Did you discover something that you didn't realize?
I'm not sure that we, really discovered something we didn't realize. I think, in our professions, we see it a lot. I think the thing that was very exciting about the work that we were able to do is we were able to come to the table with solutions to fix these problems. It was also nice because we kind of were able to employ a multidisciplinary approach to it. You had banks at the table, you had doctors at the table, we had the Department of Social Services at the table, and so it really allowed us to tackle the problem holistically instead of in a vacuum.
So, and what did you learn? Dave, was there anything?
I think that the details of South Dakota law were brought to our attention and then compared with what other states are doing. So the legislative recommendations were made that have pretty much sailed through the legislature this session.
So it's happening right now?
Right now. Mm-hmm.
And the law, what summarizes the new law that is up there?
The definitions of abuse and making the definition of emotional or non-physical abuse more explicit and therefore easier to both define in terms of doing research and define in terms of pressing charges against people who are abusing.
Right. And what else did?
It did a couple of things for financial exploitation. It gave banks the ability to reach out proactively to law enforcement to let them know. Banks right now have the ability to report certain types of abuse with our federal authorities. This gave us additional protections to do so with state authorities. We were able to look at some of the conservatorship laws, some of the power of attorney laws, and things like that to really come up with some fill in the gaps, I would say, with respect to some of the laws on our books.
So and I know that, as I was exploring this, I had a chance to email several justices, our Chief Justice, and learn from their perspective, and they're excited that this is finally happening here, that we're getting these changes, and we anticipate that it will occur. I guess it's on the governor's desk to sign.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Actually,
anticipate
I knew I was a South Dakotan. I was in South Dakota when I got invited to be, and I was told to call the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of South Dakota.
Yeah.
And I did. And I figured I'd get 2 or 3 secretaries. Hello? This is Chief Justice Gilbertson.
We're in South Dakota.
So that's why we stayed, actually.
Well, part of it is he emailed me and said, well, here, let me help you with this, and we can do that. And so, wow, that's kind of neat. If we're going to summarize and look at some of the things that's going on, what would be the most important? I've said the objectives we want tonight would be how to avoid medical scams and hoaxes that are geared toward the elderly, what was found by our task force, and what is abuse by neglect, by threat, and by physical injury, and how to prevent it, and then the Senate bill update. So we're getting quite there. What would be signs of abuse? Let's talk about physical abuse, for example, David.
That's what usually that comes to mind first. It's not actually the most common category. Actually, financial exploitation is.
So financial is the most common.
And in any given year, we think about 10% of elderly people over 65 are involved in potentially one of these aspects of abuse. Physical abuse, obviously, we look for injuries that don't make sense, or the story of how the injury happened doesn't really make sense. It's much more challenging in geriatrics than it is in pediatrics. Similar thought process, but geriatric folks are often on blood thinners or warfarin or the new anticoagulants, so they bruise easily. So lots of bruises sometimes don't mean anything except you're taking your medicine.
And maybe they're not taking medicine; they bruise easily anyway.
Yeah,
because they just get so
because the skin changes.
Yeah.
Exactly, and they may be dehydrated, but the skin looks dehydrated even when you're not. So you've been there and know that.
Yeah.
So the bones may break because of osteoporosis with minor injury, and that's a true story because the bones are so fragile. So it's much more subtle. Fortunately, we have mandatory reporting. That means if I even have a suspicion, it's my obligation to report, typically to social services, but also potentially to law enforcement. And then they'll look into it to see if there's anything to substantiate my suspicion.
But what will happen, and this has happened to me, sir, your family's left because I was going to do a rectal exam. Tell me, are they hurting you? And you can see going in the brain of the person, if I say yes, I'm going to go to a nursing home. No, I'm fine, and they'll cover it up. That's a real deal.
Yeah, it's a real deal.
But I think if you suspect it or if there's a hint, then what you need to do is to call authorities. And authorities can look into it and say, well, we don't find anything wrong.
But it will be, if they get the same call 2 weeks later from somebody else and 2 weeks later after that, then there's a pattern, and a trail.
Really, most of us tend to be trusting people, and that's almost always good. I mean, you get more from a person. The students, we just know you get more if you trust. But every once in a while, it's a bad thing. We shouldn't stop trusting people, but we should take a moment to think about just what we're being asked to do.
Probably the number one advice that we give people is really don't share personal information over the phone. Generally when someone calls you with fishing for that sort of information, you should always get your sort of alert up that if you didn't initiate the call, even if the caller is very persuasive that they're somebody who you've worked with in the past or they're calling from your bank or your health insurance provider, you really just shouldn't provide the information. Instead, you should hang up, and if you believe it could have been a legitimate call, go to your own bill or find a phone number to call them back and then see if that actually was a legitimate query for your information. So calls were going into Iowa to seniors, and they were targeting seniors, and they claimed that they had a miracle drug that was a marine phytoplankton, and they would claim that this marine phytoplankton would cure over 500 of the most common diseases. And if you just paid a certain amount of money, you would have access to this miracle drug, and all of your ills will be solved. Well, unfortunately, when scammers call, they really sound convincing, and who wouldn't want to find a drug that could help take away some of your aches and campaigns. So unfortunately, some people did, believe that this was a true product and send the money. The good news is this was a case that actually in Iowa, they were able to find the perpetrators and take them to court, and so that one no longer exists. But it's a great example of, just when something's too good to be true, it probably is. But I think it's it's a good story in that, no one should feel shame or feel bad if they actually do fall for one of these scams, because the scammers are getting smarter every day. And so whether it's through the email or through the mail or over the phone, when you get these sort of this information or these pleas from these scammers, it sounds very legitimate. And so the smartest person on the planet could fall for one of these on any given day. And so people just really have to have they have to stay on alert at all times. One thing that's rising across the country and here in South Dakota is that, ID theft is going up every year, but one form of ID theft, which is medical ID theft, is going up as well. And what folks should look out for this is just simply to really look at your insurance bills and statements when you get them. So even when they say this is not a bill, still take a look and make sure all the procedures and charges on there are something that actually was yours. And similarly, just to keep track of your health card ID numbers, your insurance ID numbers, your Medicare ID numbers, because again, once somebody has those, they can fraudulently bill your accounts for procedures or medications that they might want. So that's just something that we all need to be a lot more aware of, because it's happening more and more. And I think last year it actually was about half of all ID theft had some piece of medical ID theft as part of it.
So quickly, any response to that unbelievable bit of information? People call and solicit all the time. I mean, sometimes they're good causes, but not always.
No, I think you have to be really careful. I mean, she noted several things. Urgency, send money now is a telltale sign that you're being scammed. In addition, it should always be acceptable for you to say, is there a number I can call you back at, or where can I get more information? Can you mail something? Yeah. If they're unwilling to listen to you and just keep pushing hard for a sales pitch, that's a good sign that it's a scam.
Yeah.
I think maybe I have to call my son the detective before I call you back.
Yeah. I think the answer is I will call you back. I would have to think about it. Oh, but if you get, when I sold Cutco knives, it was, you had the special deal only today. Well, of course, there's a special deal every day. I mean, not to say that Cutco knives aren't the greatest knives. They really are. That's the truth. But that's the whole deal, the spiel. So let's listen to this. We actually have a recording of the phytoplankton scam. So take a listen, put yourself in the position of the person receiving the call, and grow from this.
Hello?
Oh, hi.
Merry Christmas to you.
Marine phytoplankton, they found, is the purest food source on the planet. Gram for gram, marine phytoplankton has 187 times the vitamin B1 of tuna, 650 times more magnesium than spinach, 750 times more calcium than milk. And I'm sure you know that, they put all kinds of things in the food we eat nowadays. Whether it's the meat they give steroids to, or the crops that come from the farm belt. They've been growing crops there for over 200 years, and the nutrients in the soils are depleted. So they add fertilizers so the crops grow real good, but they haven't replaced the trace minerals and other things. So the nutrition that we get from the food we eat is nothing like it was 200 years ago. They found that this marine phytoplankton, they found that it's actually helping with or fully reversing over 500 different health problems. Things like arthritis, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, fibromyalgia, sleep disorders, even cancer. We're not supposed to say cure for cancer, but my wife is a survivor definitely because of the marine phytoplankton. I believe that 100%.
Okay, can you, marine, what is it, marine what?
Phytoplankton.
How do you spell phyto?
P-H-Y-T-O, plankton.
Okay. And where are you located?
Las Vegas, Nevada.
Oh, okay. What was the name of the company? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
It is French spelling and pronunciation en natural health solutions.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow, it sounds like it's a miracle.
It's pretty amazing stuff.
The first time I take this stuff, I'm going to fill that within 20 minutes.
20 to 40 minutes, absolutely.
Boy, oh boy. Take-home message, Dr. Brechtelsbauer?
If it seems too good to be true, it's too good to be true.
I mean, just run from this. So what should they do?
You know, if you receive a call like that, you should hang up. You know, hang up right away. If you're getting a lot of calls like that, the other thing people should do is take a look to see whether their phone number is on the do not call registry. Now, that's not going to prevent some fraudsters from still getting through, but if you find yourself getting a lot of calls for those magical supplements, certainly take a look at that.
I think that people are invading our privacy. You should get a little angry. I mean, I never suggest that we are ever discourteous to people, but just gentle hang up. A gentle hang up is an appropriate thing. Well, we've got questions that we should jump into. Okay? We have someone, a 60-year-old woman from Beersford wants to know who she should call if she's concerned about abuse of an elder neighbor. Do you, she doesn't have to give her identity. But does she have to give her neighbor the identity when she calls about them?
If you call social services, they're going to ask who is calling, but they're not obligated to tell if you make a concern, they will make a home visit to that person you're concerned about. They do not have to reveal to that person why they're there or who called them about that.
Right. And you can tell them, and if you warn them that something's going on and don't give your name, they'll still go there.
I suspect they would.
I'm not. I am saying that you should probably give your name, but if that's keeping you from calling, then call and don't give your name. A woman from Mitchell, if I want my house to go to my son, how do I make this request known? And do I need a trust or something?
You know, a trust is one common estate planning tool that's available to a lot of people. It's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach, though. So what I would recommend this woman from Mitchell do is find a good estate planning attorney in Mitchell and just ask, say, this is my desire, this is my plan, what do I need to do to make that happen?
So my question, though, is that if you don't have, you don't have to go to a lawyer, an estate planning person, like a trust department, but there are other estate planners.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of time estate planning, it takes a team to do a really good estate plan. Certainly you'll need a lawyer to draft legal documents, but a trust department can absolutely help you with certain facets of your plan, as can a good accountant.
Right. Do you have to have a minimum amount before a trust department is going to help you?
I think that probably varies by bank. You know, I'd encourage you, if you have a question about estate planning through a trust department, you go to the bank you're interested in and ask.
I have to say, and I'll just say this out loud, and I don't need to say this, and I'm not getting paid for this or anything, but your bank, which is Brookings Bank, First Bank and Trust, has a trust department. They're just wonderful. It's so good to have, and they help us with our investment. But when my mother was losing her capacity, we put the responsibility of all the bills to be paid by the trust department. And then when my wife's parents were losing their ability, they took care of the bills, lined up everything. And it was a remarkably small amount, I thought, for a wonderful service. And I know the bookkeeping and the CPA services, the businesses that do that kind of accounting thing, they can do it as well. So, when there's a time when you're at the point where you're having trouble with the bills, just pay somebody a small amount. They'll be happy to keep your finances in order, and then you don't end up with problems.
Yeah, a trust department is a remarkable opportunity for people. It's a really good tool. Encourage people to check that option out.
We really need your questions. Please, this whole thing is your show, so call in your questions, please. 1-888-376-6225. That's 376-6225. Or send us an email at oncall.tv.org or prairiedoc.org. So we have a woman from Mitchell. if I want my, 72-year-old man from Huron asked, describe emotional abuse.
That's tough to define, and we worked on it on the task force, actually, trying to make a legal definition. It's withdrawing support or emotional support from someone. It's belittling someone. It's criticizing whatever they do. It's, help me.
Yeah, that's, it's basically making someone feel awful.
Bad.
Intentionally.
Yeah. And some people are more easily abused in that regard. Some of them come right back. But my sense is that it's, you can bet that physical abuse, for the most part, comes from a male. It just does. It not always, but most of the time comes from a male. Emotional abuse comes equally from both sides. And it's, if you find that that's happening to you, you can call for help. I would say talk to your doctor. And that would be one place. You don't have to go to the police or anything like that, but if you're feeling really bummed out by what's happening, talk to your doctor.
I know personal experience isn't science, but most caregivers are female. And most caregivers at times get stressed enough to break down in a moment of stress and strike out. Right. So there's a number of times I've been involved in a situation where it's been the daughter or daughter-in-law
who's caring for that
or
elderly
the female
person.
spouse taking care of the husband that just, not really aiming, but causing harm with a swing of the arm or a slap of the face.
Or emotional abuse. And you can't blame somebody who is burdened. So you're raising your 3 kids and they're not, ready for breakfast, and your husband is leaning you on doing all that, and you've got an extra job because you've got to help support the family, and his mother is staying with you, and you're responsible for her, and she's losing her memory, and she's a burden. No wonder you have to have empathy for the people who are carrying the burden of caring for a family member, and sometimes if it's more than you think you can emotionally take, I think, wouldn't you agree? Time to go somewhere else. Get the assisted living, let the other family members take their turn, something else.
Ask for help.
Another issue or another opportunity in many of our communities is adult daycare. The kids go to school in the day, everybody goes to work, grandma or grandpa go to daycare, which many of them perceive as going to school or work, get dropped off in the morning, there's programming going on, there's staff there to share the burden. Lunch is usually served, and then afternoon programs. Most of the South Dakotans I talk to, because they're so darned independent, and I can do this myself, thank you, and we don't need that yet, I have a tough time getting people to consider adult daycare. But it's one of the things that's been proven to delay nursing home admission. And if you do get admitted, it's a more smooth transition because you're having some experience in a group of elderly adults together with people around with programming and meals served.
And it's not as expensive as the full nursing home.
Oh, not nearly, although expense is an issue that has to be addressed.
And but it also may pave the way for the elderly person to go, this is not so bad, because I think there's an inappropriate fear of nursing homes. Maybe it was the old abused places where they were the old folks' home, but now nursing homes are very carefully regulated. There is not abuse that's going on.
It's interesting that the most common abuse in nursing homes is resident to resident. It's not staff resident. Now, that happens, and it's very much reported.
The most common abuse is resident to resident. So we have another full screen picture of the kinds of abuse that can occur. Let's look at it. There's the physical abuse, there's the psychological, there's the sexual abuse even, there's financial exploitation, and a big one that's neglect. And I see that in the emergency room when they come in and they are very dirty and not well cared for, and their ulcers and so on and so forth. And it's either more than what the family can handle, or in the last case I had, it was neglect by the person themselves. They were losing ground, and the medication needs changed. They were dehydrated because of the medicine that they were taking, which was appropriate in the first place, but wasn't then. And and she just wasn't getting help.
My experience in Virginia was in an underserved rural area. And while I was there, the hospital opened a 100-bed long-term care facility on the campus. And we had to fill those beds, and we got every hard-to-place patient coming into our nursing home from all over the state of Virginia. And that's when I learned loving care and skilled care were two different things. Both are important. But most of these people had wonderful, loving families, but they came in with pressure sores and malnourished because they just couldn't provide the care you need for that degree of need. But it was not skilled care, but for the most part, it was loving care.
Well, you know, I can tell you, you can be the best care provider in the world, but when they need to be rolled once every hour, and you've got a job that you're working on, and you've got 4 kids pulling on you, and a husband that needs, or you know, those things. If you find yourself being pushed into a corner by someone that you don't know, that you have to do something right now, slow down. Ask the right questions. Don't rush in. Call for help. Hang up.
A young man called me and was crying quite loudly and moaning, and Grandma, I need help and I can't call my mom and dad because I want to keep it a secret, and you got to promise me you'll keep it a secret. But I'm in jail and I need some money for bail. But I can't go to my parents and I don't know what else to do. And he was crying and carrying on, you know. I asked him what he was arrested for, and he said somebody had stopped him, an officer, for having marijuana in his car, and he was not the driver, or the car was not his, and of course he said the marijuana wasn't either. And I said, and so he needed, I think it was $5,000 bail money to get out of jail so he could go home or do whatever he had to do. And all this time he was carrying on and crying and how terrible it was, and he didn't know where to go or what to do. Between sobs and cries and everything, I said, well, let me talk to your arresting officer. Well, he said, you got to promise me first that you'll give me the money. And I said, no, I won't do that. And he said, well, then you can't talk to my arresting officer. And I said, well, then you won't get the money. I had no intention of ever sending him money anyhow, but I thought I better get as much information as I could. They had their routine well rehearsed. He was very convincing, had a story down where he got my family from, I don't know, probably an obituary, but he knew I had a daughter had been in town and family in town and who they were. I'm 90 years old, and when I was growing up, working and growing up, security in our homes was very poor. We never locked our doors, and we were sure that nobody was going to steal from us or come at us with such scams as what's going on today. So it's a kind of a change for us older people to go from a culture like that into one where we must have high security.
Wow. Now there's a smart lady, you know. We know that a large percentage of people who get to be 90 still have their noodle. And there is one right there, so smart. Let me speak to your officer, please, the police officer that's holding you. That was the answer. Any other recommendations on that?
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is sometimes these people, when they call, they don't have the information. They'll say, grandma, until the grandma volunteers a name, like, is that you, John? Is that you, Sue? So, be careful. Also, it's always a clear sign when they say, don't tell Dad, he'll kill me. Betray the family trust. Call Dad if you need to see if Johnny actually was in Canada.
I'll call you back.
Right.
What's your number? Always call back. Somebody calls and says, I need your credit card. And you're convinced and you want to give them the credit card. Do you ever give the credit card number?
No.
You never give the Social Security number.
No.
I remember somebody called, and of course it was it's a thing I believe in, and I was going to give them the credit card. I gave them the credit card number, and they said, "What's that number on the back?" And I said, "You called me, didn't you? What am I doing giving you a credit card number?" "No, I won't give you the number on the back." Okay, all right, we're good. So let's go to some questions. 82-year-old woman from Sioux Falls receives many calls a week about a medic alert button that she has already paid for. She's on the no-call list, but they keep calling. How does she get them to stop? And why is she getting that call?
Well, unfortunately, not everyone abides by the law. If a number shows up on her caller ID, she can report that to the Federal Trade Commission. She can report that as someone who's violating it. However, many times that's not even a legitimate number. It shows up as something, but it's something else. I'd recommend she do two things. First, she calls her local telephone company and asks them for help. They have things that they can do in place to block certain numbers. The other thing is she calls her police department and tells them she's getting these unwanted and harassing calls.
Yeah. Wow. Similar to the above, a 76-year-old man from Viborg keep getting calls from a telemarketer from a department store trying to get debit credit card numbers. Is this a scam?
Should we vote?
Yeah.
Scam.
Unanimous.
Don't give the, if it's something legitimate, you'll know. If it's something new and you don't know, never give the credit card number. I think one of the things that there's a company somewhere that wants money for police and firefighters. That's the great one, and they want me to give them their credit card numbers to donate. Don't you believe in the police and support your police department? Don't you believe in supporting your fire department? So I've asked my police department, the chief of police, I've asked the fire department people, they say, just give locally. Don't give to this. I don't know what it is, forget about it. Give locally. I've got one comment from a woman from Webster. Just wanted to encourage everyone to call social services if you suspect something. Years ago, there was rumors of neighbor abuse on the block. Upon paying closer attention, I suspected a child was molested by her stepfather. I called social services, and sure enough, that child was getting sexually abused by her stepfather. Even if it's just a suspicion, make the call because it can change someone's life. Good job. Do that. Take the phone up, pick the phone up and make those calls. That's wonderful. Two questions coming. 76-year-old, any comment, by the way, about the sexual abuse deal?
No, except to, call. If you see something, call. I think that's an important message for everyone listening, is if you suspect something, call.
What's this, where is the social services number? Is it under S?
South Dakota State of Department of Social Services, in the case of elders, Adult Services and Aging.
So it's in the front of the phone book?
Yep.
76-year-old man from T, is there such a thing as government life insurance? And similarly, a man from Pierre, could you talk about government trusts? I don't know anything about those.
No,
Kristina?
I'm not familiar with anything relating to government life insurance either. I encourage him to look up and get some good information on that, because that's a concept that's unfamiliar to me.
I'm over 65, and I'm getting mail with government-like envelopes that are obviously trying to mimic
The government?
Social Security or something, but they're not. No, they'd be very, very suspicious. There's not government life insurance other than Social Security, and you know about that.
And we know about Social Security. It's a company that's calling themselves the government. 68-year-old man from Sioux Falls, comment on ombudsman function within the nursing homes and how it works. You know about the ombudsman?
Yeah. I mean, Dr. Holm.
Ombudsman meaning good guy.
Yeah. Dr. Holm talked about the many nursing home regulations that, particularly since 1987, and part of that was the Ombudsman program. This is a employee of the Department of Social Services whose job is to handle complaints by patients themselves or residents themselves in nursing homes or their family members, and be a mediator on whatever the issue is. A disinterested but very skilled third party that knows the rules, knows how to bring people together if it's possible to get them together, and if other avenues have to be taken to pursue that.
There was somebody in the nursing home, an employee of the nursing home, who was getting her college paid for by one of the very elderly and on the border of compromised, and the ombudsman were called and protected the person. Woman from Sioux Falls, what are the benefits of having a trust over a will?
Well, that's a good question. A trust avoids probate. A trust is an estate planning mechanism. It allows you to set up your property and control its distribution in various forms. Trusts are, there's no good one-size-fits-all answer to this, but that would be one advantage of it. If you have questions about whether a trust or a will is a good option for you, you should really talk to an attorney or a trust department.
But probate is, you've got to pay who? The government or the lawyer or what?
Taxes is a big thing for probate. Again, estate planning is complicated. There's no one size fits all answer. You really need to work with a team of trusted professionals to find an estate plan that's right for you.
What do you have to say about doctors who may not respect your wishes because they think you are not competent? Dr. Brechtelsbauer.
All right.
What is competence, by the way? I mean, what is, some would say, better, competence is a decision by the judge. Capacity is the decision by the doctor. But there's some laws that talk about doctors deciding competence. So the question I would have is, how do you know competence first?
If it's a question in my mind, we can do some simple cognitive tests in the office. If it's not clear after that, to do formal neuropsych testing, which is a much more intense experience as far as testing.
I kind of like to put it down to if they can learn a new thing. You give them 3 things to remember, and if they can remember 3 things, and then they still can remember 3 things, that's probably the best overall measure and function. That's the Tupperware in the oven syndrome. But that said, if your doctor's not trusting you,
you could change doctors.
That's what I would say. That's an important issue. You need to trust your doctor, and if you're suspecting that there's a problem, might be that you're competent.
Or if you go to another doctor and the same thing happens, maybe you're losing it and just don't have insight into that.
That's right. And that can happen too.
Yeah.
And at this point, you need to start making sure that you've got your trust department all set up and the money laid out, and so that people aren't going to be taking advantage of you. 79-year-old man from Brandon, he has 2 daughters in Sioux Falls and has macular degeneration, so he can't drive anymore, but he has a car. His daughter, without asking or telling him, is using his car for her daily needs. Is this abuse, and how can he stop it?
Well, it's certainly exploitation.
It is, isn't it?
If he's not giving her permission to use that car and she's doing so without his permission and he doesn't want her to do so, I think the easiest way is to take away the keys. Take away the keys. Keep them someplace.
And he needs it. Part of it is, she doesn't know he's offended by this. Maybe she just feels like it's part of the deal. The answer is, don't do it anymore, and I'm taking the keys. Here's the keys, and if she continues to drive it because she made a key.
Pick up the phone and call the police or someone.
A woman asks, if you live alone with no family, is there someone that can check on you? The point I'm making in that one is, and we're all making is, we all have our right to self-direction until we lose it. We have autonomy. We should have that respected. And you need to exercise your autonomy right up to the point where you no longer have the capacity. Woman who asks, be strong. A woman asked if you live alone with no family, is there someone that can check on you regularly? Is it a form of abuse to deny more than one bath a week in a nursing home? David.
The regulation says you must have at least one bath a week in a nursing home. Many nursing homes are able to provide more than that, but there is everyday baths are unlikely given the amount of baths have to be given every day in the nursing home.
Now, is there a way for you to be checked regularly? There are people in the nursing profession. Our hospital, for example, will check on people if they are requested to.
There's some of the larger churches have check lines that you can call in the morning, or they will call and make sure you're doing okay.
A friend.
Some of the senior centers, just a friend.
A family member. I think if you set it up where you can find somebody.
Don't be embarrassed to ask for a little help from friends, neighbors, churches.
Woman from Vermilion, what does a revocable trust mean? We've got a minute.
Sure, that's an estate planning mechanism that basically allows a person putting their property into trust to make changes to the trust. So it's revocable. You can change it. That's probably the easiest.
Revocable meaning changeable.
Changeable. Some people instead set up irrevocable trust, which means this
You
is the
can't
way it's
change
going to be. It's probably the 30-second version of that. Again, if you have a question about which one's right, though, contact a trusted estate planning professional.
So I was thinking about fear of nursing home, and I thought we would make a quick comment about, Dave, do you see people who are inappropriately fearful of nursing homes? Quickly, 30 seconds.
Inappropriately fearful, yes. Concern for reasons they experienced in the past, I mean, I understand that. And adjusting to a nursing home can be very difficult initially, but most people discover there's lots of caring, loving people there, both other residents and staff, that are quite dedicated.
And very helpful.
I've had a loved one in a nursing home, and she didn't want to go, but she did meet lots of people and make friends, and
had a great time. It was a wonderful experience. 5-star hotel. Why would you not go?
5-star prices, not quite some of the ambience.
True. And now for the winner of tonight's Prairie Doc quiz question. Name 2 possible signs that would warn of some kind of abuse. Possible signs of elder abuse include unexplained bruises, burns, injuries. There may be bed sores or poor hygiene. The person may become withdrawn, agitated, or depressed. There may be a sudden change in the person's financial situation, and more. It was Karen DeBoer of Sioux Center, Iowa, who answered the question correctly. Thank you, Karen, for participating, and a book will be in the mail to you soon. So any comments about that quiz question?
There's all sorts of things that would make one suspicious, and that list was not complete, although it was a good list.
The oddest example of abuse that you've seen? I think of a child abuse that I've taken care of, and I think of the lack of care that was provided, but it was the patient's fault. I mean, they isolate themselves sometimes. They don't want to go to the nursing home, so they're not even.
And I think couples sometimes make promises to one another that, quote, I will never put you in a nursing home, but circumstances change, and like the example I gave in my Virginia experience, a loving care, sometimes as good as you are, you can't do all the skilled things that need to be done to keep body and soul together.
I've heard this too many times. I promised him I'd never put him in a nursing home, and now they're dragging him through other things, and the point is, forget about that. Don't ever promise that. So sometimes you need it. Well, we'll be right back after this.
Most people take talking on the phone for granted, but not the thousands of South Dakotans who are deaf, hard of hearing, or speech impaired. That's why there's the Telecommunication Equipment Distribution. TED matches people in need with the right specialized phone equipment, and it doesn't cost a thing. To see if you're eligible, visit RelaySD.com. TED Relay South Dakota, connecting all of us.
Caring for the elderly my whole clinical life has been an honor and a pleasure, but some experiences have been heartbreaking. Elder abuse is one of the saddest and can come in the form of physical harm and neglect, emotional cruelty, or financial exploitation. A couple of years ago, a frail, confused elderly person arrived in the emergency room with a fracture bruises, sores, and was quite unclean. His family described that the patient had fallen multiple times recently, and I could see his needs were overwhelming his care providers. If there hadn't been physical abuse, there was at least neglect. After surgery and hospital care, we were able to send the patient to a nursing home. We all need to be aware when there might be possible physical abuse and call for help when we see it. Another case was one of emotional abuse, with blaming, shouting, and anger put upon an incapacitated elder. It was by a visiting emotionally ill family member who had arrived from afar and was unloading his own emotional baggage upon the frail and defenseless parent. The patient had been admitted for a medical issue, and the nurses were the first to recognize the abuse. Police were notified, and the visitor was banished from visiting the patient in the hospital, and even when the patient went home. Financial abuse was evident in another case when a son called and said his 80-plus-year-old mother and her new boyfriend had recently been going to the bank and removing large sums from the mother's savings account. The son believed his mother was losing it, had been spending thousands of dollars for herbal and supplemental cures for memory problems, had unpaid bills everywhere, and now was being manipulated by an opportunist. He asked me how to protect his mom's money. I saw the patient in the office. Obviously, the mother was demented and incapacitated. A judge confirmed her incompetence and determined the son as the power of attorney. Problems could have been avoided had the son been more watchful, had the mother made financial advanced planning, and had a bank's trust department or bookkeeping business been asked to pay bills. None of us are safe from abuse. When people become frail or lose their mental capacity, then bad people can take advantage of them. Elder abuse can come in the form of physical harm and neglect, emotional cruelty, or financial exploitation, and is more common than you would expect. Be aware and take precautions. Well, I sincerely want to thank Kristina Schaefer and David Brechtelsbauer for joining me tonight. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. As we all age, possible abuse is a growing concern, and the guests' understanding of elder abuse provided important information for all of us. Now on to our flu season update. We're still doing better than we were last year at this time when we had such a large peak early in the season, but you can see there is a spike beginning this week. Let's hope the peak is small this year, but we have months yet to go. If you sneeze or cough, cover it. If you're sick, stay home, don't spread it. A programming note, this will be our last on-call with the Prairie Doc until March 24th. For the next 2 weeks, our friends at South Dakota Public Broadcasting will be airing the South Dakota High School basketball playoffs. Please tune in and cheer for your teams. Go Bobcats and Bulldogs. That does it for tonight. From all of us here at On Call with the Prairie Doc, until next time, stay healthy out there, people.
Sneak into your life slowly over an extended time, then you notice that what was once easy is now painful and difficult. Achy bones and joints. Next time, On Call with the Prairie Doc.
Funding for On Call with the Prairie Doc is provided in part by
Avera is a proud sponsor of On Call on South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
Larson Manufacturing is proud to support On-Call Television as it continues to open doors for important medical information.
And by
the South Dakota Foundation for Medicare, an organization working with the state's healthcare community to improve quality of care as part of the Great Plains Quality Innovation Network.
Additional funding is provided by Aberdeen Asthma and Allergy,
Avera Heart Hospital,
Brookings Health System,
Dakota Allergy and Asthma,
Dakota Care,
Orthopedic Institute,
Physician Care Sanford Clinic Community Service Committee,
South Dakota State Medical Association,
Swiftel Communication,
and Vance Thompson Vision.
Closed captioning for the On-Call with the Prairie Doc is provided by
Avera,
Brookings Health System,
and Fishback Financial Corporation.
Only when you're told.
So I thought they were great questions. I thought our answers were important. I thought the lessons were huge. I hope the justice